Hello. Today we are going to talk about a few Form Designer gadgets that are available in the Quali COI and Protocols systems. If you haven't watched the general Form Designer screencasts, you can go back and review them now to get a more general overview of the Form Designer tool. So we're here in the Protocols system, and I want to go to the Templates section. Just to keep this minimal and to not have a big form that's going to have a ton of data in it for the example, I'm going to go into the IRB renewal form. We're going to go ahead and hide the sidebar, and I'm going to go to the end of the document just so we can have a fresh section to do our demonstration in. So now I'm going to press Add Item, and we're just going to talk through a few of the options that are available in the Protocols and COI system. One of the first things you'll notice is there is a section, but there's also a questionnaire section. These function exactly the same way. The only difference is the questionnaire section will be treated as holding required fields. So any gadget that is put in a questionnaire section will be required by the system before you can submit the template that it's in. A regular section, all of the fields that are included will be optional. I do want to mention the group because it didn't display in the other videos. The group was built a while ago and it functions like an invisible section. At the time that it was introduced, you couldn't make sections invisible the way I demonstrated in the previous video, but the preferred mechanism now would be to set up an invisible section the way I showed in the last video. So I'm going to click on questionnaire section here, and we're going to put our gadget demo questionnaire section, and I will hit save. And now we have an area of this template that we can build out some demonstrations in. So I'm going to click Add Item here, and I'm going to talk about the list gadget a little bit. So we're going to add a list. The purpose of a list is to put together a form collection that the user can add several times. So perhaps on an IACUC protocol, you might have a species list because a given protocol might involve multiple species. So you have to answer the questions about what is my species on this protocol multiple times. Another common use for list is funding source. Since a protocol can be funded from several different sources, you would want to be able to list multiple grants, perhaps some internal funding that's also assisting your project, and you would need to be able to add that set of fields to your protocol multiple times. There are also several uses for this in COI, financial entities being the most common. In a COI disclosure, a conflict of interest disclosure, you would need to be able to list multiple financial entities that you have a relationship with. So all of your questions about financial entities would be gadgets that were included in a list. So here I'm going to put my list label, and we're just going to call this colors. My demo in this video is going to be a little bit abstract because setting up full protocol data for some of the gadgets that I'm going to show is a little time consuming, and I really want to focus on what the gadgets can do. So you'll notice on the list that we have list label and we have list help. We don't have list label long. So we're going to come down, and we do have field width available. You can set up lists if they're very short. If you just need to, say, have one field that recurs, you can set up multiple lists in a single row of a given form, although because they normally have multiple fields in them, that wouldn't be a very common use of the list. You can also set up progressive disclosure, only have a list display if a series of previous gadgets are answered in a specific manner. That behaves just like progressive disclosure elsewhere in the form. One thing to note about lists and progressive disclosure is when you have progressive disclosure on a gadget that is in a list, that is part of one of these form collections, say what is the type of financial entity that I'm disclosing on in a conflict of interest example. You can only base progressive disclosure off other fields in that list. it isn't possible to have certain columns display or not display in a list based on data elsewhere in the form. So the use of progressive disclosure within a list is a little bit limited. In this case, because the list gadget overall sits at the top of the form, you would base this off of answers elsewhere in the form. And I'll show you how progressive disclosure works within a list a little bit later. So you'll see down here we have two options. We have inline and dialog. And I'll come back here a little bit later once we've added items to our list, and you'll see there are some more options here, but I do want to talk about these two configurations first. With an inline list, you'll have a table that will display, and the user will be able to click a button to add an extra line to their table, and they'll be able to fill out the fields of the table right on their normal protocol form. This works well for lists that contain 1 to at most, I'd say, 4 fields. Once you need to collect more than 4 fields in your field collection, it just gets very cluttered. And so if you need to have a very long list, like say a financial entity that might have 5, 7, 12 or more questions in it, you would then set up a dialog list. And with a dialog list, you still have the table, but the table only displays 2 or 3 key pieces of information about that list that helps you identify what that list is about. And then there's a View All button that will bring up a lightbox in your browser, similar to this lightbox right here that we're working in, and it will show you all of the detailed fields in your list. I'll show you what both of these options look like. For now, we're going to start with inline because it's kind of the simpler configuration. So I'm going to save this, and now we have our list here, and it's called colors. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to add an item, and we're going to start out and I'm going to add a drop down. We're just going to call this favorite color. And something to note about field labels on gadgets inside of a list. When you're using an inline list, the only field label you can use is the regular field label. That's all it will display, and it's what displays as the column header in your list. When you're using a dialog list, then you can use field label long, but it will only display when you're in your dialog, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and put a field label long, and we're going to say, what is your favorite color? We will not see this initially because we have this set up as an inline list. So now we will come down, and I'm only going to add primary colors here, and you'll see why in just a bit. And I'm going to hit save. Then we're going to save here, and I'm going to go over to View and preview this list. And so if I come down here, we have one field, but you can see what the list looks like. I can decide which columns to display, but there's only one field in this list, so I only have one column option. When it's empty, I'll have this Add Info button right in the list, but once I add a field, then it will display there. And so I can come here to my drop-down, and I can choose blue. If I add another line, then I can add another answer, yellow. And that's generally how lists work. You can add additional entries. Now we're going to go back to Edit, and I want to show another gadget that is unique to the compliance modules, and that is the filtered drop-down list. So I'm going to click Add Item, and I'm going to choose Filtered Dropdown. I'm going to call this Favorite Secondary Color. And the way a filtered drop-down list works is it's a drop-down list for the user, but it only populates when another multi-select gadget is given particular answers. It has to be a single response multi-select gadget, so it has to be either radio buttons or another drop-down. And similar to progressive display, when you use this gadget in a list, it can only look at other gadgets within that list for reference. But if you're using it in the general form, it could look at any radio buttons or drop down gadget anywhere else in your form. So we're going to scroll down, and here I'm going to put what is your second favorite color. A little bit of an assumption that favorite color will be primary, second favorite color will be secondary, but you can sort of see the structure here. And so we have this options when, and I can choose my gadget, much like progressive display, and I'm going to select favorite color. As soon as I select that, the system knows the options for that gadget are blue, yellow, and red. So we'll come here and we'll add 2 options after blue, and we will add green and purple. And then we'll add 2 options after yellow, orange, and green. And then we will add 2 options after red, purple, and orange. And so I will save this gadget, save the form, and when we preview, now we have another drop-down on our inline list. And when I drop down here, because I selected blue on that line, my options are green or purple because those were the answers I associated with blue. And if I choose the drop down here, my options are orange or green because those are the answers I associated with yellow in this particular list entry. And then if I add another line, now this is grayed out because the gadget it depends on doesn't have an answer, so it can't really populate anything. But if I come over here and I select red, then my options will be purple or orange. And so that's how the filtered drop-down list works and how it works in a list context. So now we're going to go back to Edit, and I'm going to look at the list configuration again now that I have a couple fields in it. And if I scroll down, then we can now see favorite color, favorite secondary color show here. I can turn them off. That doesn't really make sense in an inline list context, but if I were to go to dialog list and turn off favorite secondary color and hit save, now when we come to dialog list, we look at our list, I can't edit these right here, and I only see my favorite color. But now I have this edit button over here, and if I click on it, now I can see all of the data. And you can see here that our longer labels are displaying. Because I haven't turned them off, the main label is also displaying. So I'm going to come back to Edit, and we're going to turn off those main labels for these 2 gadgets. We'll turn off Display on Form. And we will turn off Display on Form. And now when we come back here, this hasn't changed. We still see the label for the column header because that's the only thing that can display for the column header. But when I come in here, we don't see the main label at all. We only see our field label long. The other thing is, now if I come to columns, I can choose, even though it's not the default list configuration. So the default, when I first open a document, will always come up with whatever I configured in the template. But as a user, I can decide I want to see different columns from this list for the review that I'm doing. I need to change this display for myself. I can come here and I can turn on favorite secondary color, and now I can see that. I can even come and turn off favorite color. I can set this up to display whatever I need it to display. So now we're going to go back to Edit. One other detail about progressive disclosure that I do want to mention. I said that progressive disclosure can only look at gadgets within a list when it's being used on a list gadget. It also only works in dialog. You can't set up progressive disclosure for an inline list because everything has to display in that table format. And having cells appear and disappear from certain lines in a table would be a very disconcerting experience. So progressive disclosure is not supported for inline lists. It is supported for dialog lists. And I do want to show how progressive disclosure works for the filtered drop-down list because it is a little bit different than some other gadgets in the system. So I'm going to show you how progressive disclosure works with lists. So we're going to come down here, and I'm going to select the file attachment gadget. And this is exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to set up places on your form where you can add attachments. In a list situation, you can set it up where the user can add as many attachments as they want, as many attachments as they can add list items. So here I'm going to put secondary color attachment. We're going to scroll down. I'm going to turn that off because we do have a dialog list, and I'm going to put, please attach an image of your favorite, of your second favorite color if it is purple. So if we come down, we have our progressive disclosure. I do want to talk briefly about the configurations that are available. You can change the text that displays on the attachment gadget. You can't change the way the attachment functions. So here we have drag and drop a file or choose text. If we scroll up and look at our preview, you can see it says drag and drop a file, or we have the choose button. The big advantage to being able to change this is if you have an attachment gadget, say in an inline list, and depending on the screen resolution of your user, you might want to shorten this a little bit. So I'll sometimes reduce it to just drag and drop, and then the choose button will be there, or perhaps even drag, drop, or depending on what you want to actually display on your particular form. And we can see here, this gets the same idea across, but it uses up a little bit less space. So on a situation where you don't have a lot of space for the gadget to display, this could display a little bit more elegantly. But then I am going to set up progressive disclosure, and we are going to scroll down and choose favorite secondary color. And because this is a drop-down, our options are is or is not. That's exactly the same as other radio button or drop-down options. So I'm going to choose is. And now I'm going to drop down here, and it's going to show me all of my options. The thing is, some of my options appear multiple times. Green appears as a follow-up to both yellow and blue. Orange appears as a follow-up to both yellow and red. The most common real-world example of this is if you have a filter drop-down and one of the options is other. Other is likely to be an option no matter what the previous field was answered, or at least in multiple different answers on the previous field. And so you might have several others in the drop-down. You do have to have the progressive display check for each one, because progressive display isn't checking for the label, it's checking for an ID. It's checking for a particular answer that's listed in the drop-down gadget. So in this case, I put attach a picture of your favorite color if it is purple, the implication being this will display if the answer is purple. So I will choose one, but then I will have to add a second check, and then come here and scroll down, favorite secondary color is, and I have to come here and now select the other purple option. So we're going to hit save. I'm going to go back to view, and we'll edit one of our options. And you can see here we have red, the favorite secondary color is orange, but if I change that to purple, then our attachment gadget appears. And I can come here and I can select choose, and then I can scroll through and pick the appropriate attachment that I need. And so that's how the attachment gadget works. That's how it will look. So if I click here and then I'll add an attachment, you see there's a view attachment option. And if you attach an image or a PDF, you will be able to view that directly in the browser, which is nice. And there are some controls here, but you can also download the file. If you attach anything aside from a PDF or an image, if you attach Excel documents or Word documents, we don't have the in-browser preview for those. That would be quite a bit more involved to build out, but you can still download them. So I'm going to hit Done, and I'm going to change the columns to show everything so you can see what it looks like when the attachment is included. We can click on that and view it as well. There are some other gadgets that let you look out at units and people and have some integrations with some other parts of the system. Go back to Edit. I'll just add this below the list. If we go down and we see if you do person type ahead, and I will go here and put person. If we go over to view and I click here, I can begin typing and it will automatically do a predictive typing search of the people that are listed in this particular environment. And there is a similar lookup for unit select. If I hit save, then I can come here and it will give me a drop down of the units that are available in my environment. Those are the only other real gadgets that are particularly unique to the compliance environment, but you can see how these tools could be used with all the other gadgets to build a number of more dynamic structures in your forms. I hope this has been useful, and I hope that you're able to build a number of dynamic forms in the COI applications with these tools. Thank you very much.